Welcome to Kev's Travel Stories. Each week I'll be bringing you a story from the weird and wonderful world of travel, a world that can change the way you see life and love and even the way we find meaning. Places that are iconic and sometimes surprising and even terrifying. So sit back and enjoy while we go on a magical mystery tour together. Welcome to Kevin's Travel Stories, and this one is one that really is a painful but salutary lesson, I think, that we should all at some stage in our life take. I'm talking about visiting the battlefield of Verdun, and I'm also talking about looking at war and the after effects of war. This is a sister podcast to my podcast on Taiwan, A City on the Brink. I visited Taiwan as a podcast shows. Do check it out. It's been extremely popular. I visited Taiwan before the threatened invasion by the Chinese to see what a city's like and a nation is like before the cataclysmic, apocalyptic impact of war. And Taiwan is a city so beautiful, so full of life, so radiant, so much going on and so rich. And then I go back to France. I go back to one of the great battles, perhaps the most bloody battle of the First World War, which was a series of unspeakable horrors. And I look at what it's like, what is the cost of war, what I'm going to show you, and you can find, dear listener, and I know there are so many of you around the world now, our numbers are increasing really dramatically. So hello to the 120 plus countries that listen to us. So I want you all at some stage to try to make your way over to Europe, to go to France and to find the village of Verdun, the town of Verdun. And outside of Verdun, you will find the Ossuary. This is the Daumont Ossuary. And this is the result of a battle that went down in history as being possibly the most brutal and costly battle ever waged on the world. So let me just set the scene for you. It's 1916. Two great forces are aligned against each other. In this case, mainly the French and the Germans. There's a place called Verdun, which is just on the border. And there was a huge fort there, part of the defenses that the French had created, Fort Daumont. It's a little bit of land that pushed out, formed a little peninsula into Germany. And the Germans' high command decided that this would be where we're going to attack. If we can cut off Verdun, we will have access. Not only will it protect our own troops further back, the town of Metz, but it will open up the pathway to take over the rest of France. So, on February the 21st, 1916, the Germans began this counter-offensive and they took over the Fort of Daumont, which was this huge fort, dug deep into the ground, the size of a small city. It now seems that it was a strategic mistake to abandon it, but the fort was only manned by a handful of French soldiers. They were captured, and basically this great fort was taken without a fight and turned against Verdun. And the French rushed in, and so began a bloody trench warfare. And in the first week, over 2 million shells were fired by the French. Can you imagine that? And we're talking about shells the size of you and me, shells the size of small cars. It's unimaginable what the carnage must have been like. This battle of Verdun went on until the 18th of December of that year. It was a 10-month battle. At first, the Germans were on top, and then the French slowly started to push back. And in the end, the French managed to outflank and outmaneuver the Germans. They took back Fort Daumont. But do you know how many people had died in the meantime? Over 500,000 French, German. And then, of course, there would have been volunteers from other armies and volunteers from around the world who were fighting for both sides. So there would have been actually 600,000 dead. And you could double that for those that had been lost limbs, had been affected by gas warfare. And then something very, very strange happened. When the war was over, the Bishop of Verdun, I think he was a Jesuit priest, he was so horrified, and he saw the remains. There were so many remains. As you can think, 700,000 souls rotting away in the ground, the bodies of these soldiers. So he started a campaign. He basically gathered all the bones using mechanical trucks and diggers. He gathered the bones, they rinsed and cleaned all the bones, and he created this ossuary. It's the Latin for bone. I was on a trip as part of an EU outreach. The European Union was founded in some senses because of the battle and the other terrible battles. And the thinking was that if you exchange goods and you exchange education and you have your children and young adults educated and have cross-border not only commerce but education and various scientific endeavors, you're less likely to kill one another. And this, by and large, has seemed to work for the European EEC, as it then was. And it was part of this outreach from the EU that had a group of us from Ireland visiting both the parliaments and the battlefields. And the battlefields were the most sobering aspects, because it really shows what happens when ordinary life breaks down and ordinary politics breaks down and we revert to war. So come with me to this extraordinary place, the Daumont Ossuary, and it's on a field at the top of which you'll find this building. The field is filled with these most beautifully manicured lawns, and they're full of white crosses. Tens of thousands of the fallen, the French fallen, are commemorated there. But that's not the place I want to take you to really show the shocking impact of war. So you, as a citizen living in peace, can really get a sense of it. We walk up and we come to the ossuary. The ossuary is like a submarine. It's made of very dark limestone and marble. It looks to me like a submarine, though it's actually designed to look like the hilt of a sword, the French sword, pushed into the ground to mark the spot that they would resist the invader. That is the whole point of the thing. It's a very, very dark building. You are not allowed to take photographs. You are not allowed to camera. You will understand why when you come with me into the heart of darkness. So you approach this building and you look along the line and you will see these small little portholes looking into this low-lying building. If you Google the Daumont Ossuary, you will see exactly what I am talking about. You will get a sense of what you're about, the horror you're about to witness. So you are invited to approach these portholes, which are the size of portholes in a cruise liner. They're not very big. And you look in, and it's reinforced glass. And then slowly your eyes adjust to the darkness within. And this building, as I say, is the length of 3 or 4 tennis courts. It's a very big building. And as you gaze into the side and you look into what is the foundation of the building, you see bleached bones. What the bishop had done is he gathered the bones of everyone, French and German. There would have been Irish fighters, there would have been Australians, there would have been people from around the world who'd volunteered, who'd been caught up in the carnage, and they're all there. And they're all shards of bones that have been completely mixed up. You can see parts of skulls, you can see parts of arms and legs, the bones, the tibula, the fibula, the pelvis, and the skulls with these awful ragged holes where either shrapnel or bullets or bayonets have dispatched the unhappy owner. And what is most awful about this is you can't tell the nationality. The 600,000 people that died in this 10-month battle, which didn't result in really anything other than a bit of ground gained and then lost, you can't tell whether they're French. You can't tell whether they're German. You can't tell their nationality, you can't tell their age, you can't tell their circumstances. But then what I did was I tried to think of my son, I tried to think of my grandson, I tried to think of my friends. These are the bones of grandsons, these are the fragments of friends, of family, of fathers, of brothers. When you actually start to see the true horror of the anonymity of death, that it brings it home. What was this for? Who won? Who got any respite? And what was the suffering? What was the story of each and every one of those souls? It is a very deep and really powerful experience. And that was the other side of going to Taiwan, where you see the young men and women who at the moment are enjoying life. But the other side is all the young men in this ossuary were enjoying life at some stage. They all had plans to marry, they had plans to enjoy life, they had plans to share life, to create families. And here they are, destroyed. And the same thing can happen again. It's the benefit of going to places like Verdun, the sense of here are the consequences of warfare. And nothing can be plainer than the nose on your face, than looking at the bones of these mainly young males who all died and whose remains they weren't even recognized, most of them. They were just dug up, their bodies brought together, and here they rest at the top of this hill. And it is a deeply powerful thing to see. I've been to Auschwitz, I've been to the Killing Fields, I've been to Hiroshima. But there's something about this ossuary, this cold place on the top of this beautiful field, this hill in France. And you look out from the ossuary and you can see the outline of the trenches where this 10-month battle raged. And some days the trench would advance a few meters and then retreat a few meters. And this went on, and the ground was literally soaked in blood. So that is the message that I took. And that is one of the reasons I visited a place that could be on the verge of war. And I suppose if there is a war in Taiwan, it could spread further. And we all, in some ways, are answerable and responsible for our futures and the future of peace in this world. I don't think it's possible when you go to a place like Verdun to just throw up your hands and say, well, it's all impossible, isn't it, really? No, it's even to bear witness is an act that is powerful. To go and inform yourself through travel is an act that is responsible. And I think that's one of the great benefits of travel, where you actually go and you see the consequences. You educate yourself to the consequences of actions that we as human beings take. And that is the first step to taking action. So please, I beg you, go and visit the great battlefields if you are in Europe. Go and see these places that are now really sacred. And they're really crime scenes to our own stupidity. And I think you will inform yourself. So as we face into a difficult world, you will not be gung-ho, as we sometimes hear these voices raised of, isn't it great that we're an imperial power? And the voices raised in favor of violence. And you will see, well, actually, that's not the case. When you stand in Hiroshima, it's not the case of any glory. When you go and visit the ossuary at Verdun and you look on the remains, literally tons of bleached bones gathered in an incredible salute to really the folly of man. And that is the start of seeing the light.